Hello, I'm Dr. Sheldon Roth, and I'd like to share with you today some of my understanding of President Donald Trump on the basis of the research and writing of my recent book. In particular, what we want to focus on is what factors in his personality play a major role in his current handling of our national catastrophe with the coronavirus. In this regard, in thinking about Trump's personality, I ask you to pay attention to two very large features of the construction of that personality. One we could subsume under the heading of persona, and the other is under the heading of the private self. These two large categories cover a great deal of President Trump's personality. Now, the word persona I'm applying to President Trump because he himself has used that word to describe himself. This is an ancient Latin word coming from the ancients, where the mask of the actor was called the persona, and there was a person behind that mask. And one needn't confuse the two, although they are often related. I'll read you exactly what Trump has written about it. I'm quoting some passages in my book. This was in 2004. Trump was reading the autobiography of Carl Jung, Swiss psychiatrist, called Dreams, Memories, and Reflections. It might surprise you that Trump was reading books, but the president actually was a strong reader in all the years prior to the campaign. Perhaps we can say a word or two about that later. But in reading Jung's book, Trump writes, "Each of us has a persona. We need it for survival. It's the face we put on for public use, and it can be intentional or unconscious. For example, a salesman who's lost his entire family in an accident is naturally devastated. But to work effectively with his customers, he must appear cheerful and confident. That is part of his persona. The only danger is when people become their personae." He's using the plural there. "That means something has been shut off somewhere along the line, and these people will end up hiding behind the false personality that works professionally. This hit home. I am aware of my public side as well as my private side, and while I'm not one for hiding much, I know there are several dimensions in which I operate. I'm not entirely a glam guy. The people I work with day in and day out know it. They see how hard I work. One person said, I am very much like a Mormon." The persona is the personality we are most familiar with Donald Trump. The billionaire, real estate developer, the campaigner with free and loose associations, spontaneous, the author of 18 books and co-authored a number of them, a fantastic athlete in his youth. Many people don't know this, but he was a star athlete in high school, had a varsity letter in several sports, and was the captain of the baseball team. When he was a senior in high school, in military school, He was actually scouted by the Red Sox and by the Phillies. However, his father stepped in and would not let him pursue a career in sports. Trump always had two ambitions in life from early childhood: to either be a professional athlete or to be a businessman like his father. His father sent him to Fordham University, a Jesuit university. We also know Trump for 14 years on The Apprentice. That's where he even contributed a new phrase to the American lexicon, always associated with him: "You're fired." But this familiar piece of Donald Trump is actually not what drives his current management of the coronavirus. And you have to take care to understand who he is in this situation. We have to look more to the private self. And let me talk a bit about the two elements of the private self that come into play in the management of the coronavirus. Many people are disturbed when they watch the press conferences at how frequently he brings up the question of economics, opening up the economy again, often making reference to record changes in the stock market, most particularly when it goes up. I've not heard him make a central point of the catastrophic days it goes down. But economics plays a particular role in the history of the Trump family. Economics equals love. It equals a way of caring about people. When Donald Trump's father, Fred Christ Trump Sr., was almost 13 years old, he lost his father in 1918 to the Spanish flu, the great pandemic of 1917-1918. It left Trump's grandmother, Elizabeth, with an economic catastrophe and 3 children. That young Fred, at age 13, taught himself carpentry and began to work after school as a carpenter. And with his mother, at that early age, they formed a company together, Elizabeth Trump and Son. Before you know it, after a few years, Fred Trump, President Trump's father, was building add-on garages to family homeowners in Queens, where they lived, because no one had cars originally. Then as they got cars, they needed a garage, and he used economics as a way of rescuing the family. I could go into Fred's father, Friedrich, in Germany, who also lost his father on the cusp of adolescence and was sent away to another city to learn a trade. But that's a long story. But the point here is all 3 males in early adolescence, a key developmental point for all of us when we first face the outside world and our cognition develops and we learn how to manipulate the environment. Each of them was challenged. In effect, they each knew adversity, a great change in their life that challenged them. From early age, Trump was taken by his father, Fred, to the workplace, to construction sites. Donald Trump learned every aspect over the years of the building trades: carpentry, plumbing, plastering. He knew how to operate all of the machinery. And during college, he actually operated a set of apartment houses in Cincinnati from Philadelphia. He had gone to the University of Pennsylvania, transferred out of the Jesuit school, and sold it with some mentoring from his father. And then went into business with his father, and what he says is he never really comprehended, felt, appreciated his father's deep love for him until he worked in business with him and then got to know his father, and his father got to know him, and their whole relationship blossomed in a tremendous fashion. And as a side note, you can hear the same words from President Trump's oldest son, Donald Jr., who'll say it wasn't until he went into work with his father in Trump organization that he felt the father's love. And the same for Eric and Ivanka, also has been with the family business all these years. And Tiffany, the child of Marla Maples from Donald's second marriage, is in law school in Washington, D.C., and involved into moving into the family circus. So the expression of love in this family is economics. That's how they keep the family secure. So when Trump is talking about economics, it runs deep in his soul. He's talking about caring for the nation. The notion of economics as a way of being a hero, as a way of rescuing, goes through all of Trump's business life. Every project he took on, most particularly in his first 10 or 20 years in business, was a project faced with enormous obstacles, financial, cultural, business-wise. And although we see him now as a successful man, I want to tell you he was ridiculed when he went into Manhattan. He went into Manhattan against his father's advice. And herein lies a tale. And he went in alone as an outsider, started with himself, hired a few people. Today, that same business has 22,000 employees. The Trump family was an ardent follower of the Reverend Norman Vincent Peale, who was the Reverend at the Marble Collegiate Church in Manhattan on Fifth Avenue for over 50 years, the author of The Power of Positive Thinking, a book that was on the bestseller list for 186 weeks. Trump was mesmerized by Norman Vincent Peale, and Trump says there were only two mentors his entire life, his father Fred and the Reverend Norman Vincent Peale. And he took in Peale's sermons for 40 or 50 years. He continued at that church even after Peale died. And he often said that Peale thought Trump, was his greatest student. And I want to read you some of Peale and then some of Trump, and you can hear, this is what you're hearing in the press conference today. These are some of the statements from The Power of Positive Thinking. Reverend Norman Vincent Peale. Formulate and stamp indelibly on your mind a mental picture of yourself as succeeding. Hold this picture tenaciously. Never permit it to fade. Your mind will seek to develop the picture. Never think of yourself as failing. So always picture success, no matter how badly things seem to be going at the moment. Practice the technique of suggestive articulation. That is, repeat audibly some peaceful words. Words have profound suggestive power, and there is healing in the very saying of them. And Trump always loved the chaos of real estate because it adhered to a basic principle of Norman Peale's: every problem has in it the seeds of its own solution. If you don't have any problems, you don't get any seeds. Now, if we look at some of what you hear from Trump in the press conference, I go back to a 2008 book that Trump co-authored, and the title of this book is Never Give Up. And in it, he has 10 rules for success. And I'll only say a few of them because you'll hear the little bit of Peale that I've said before. These are the rules for 10 rules for success. See yourself as victorious. That will focus you in the right direction. Believe in yourself. If you don't, no one else will either. Think of yourself as a one-man army. Ask yourself, what am I pretending not to see? There may be some great opportunities right around you. Great adversity can turn into a great victory. You know how often he says, we're going to have this V-shaped recovery, better than ever before. And how about the 10th rule? Look at the solution, not the problem, and never give up. Never, never, never give up. That resoluteness from childhood on, this aggressive, competitive nature of Trump remains true. And so when you listen to the press conference, forget the persona that we know. Listen to the Peale that you hear. Peale is appealing to Trump and always has been. There are many other aspects, obviously, of Trump that play into this position. But one other aspect I want to bring into your focus and remind you that he was a model student in military school and captain of the baseball team. He was seen as a very integrative person, and he was similar in Trump management, although he followed every single detail himself. He was like Harry Truman, the buck stops here. He signed checks, every check himself. The year he didn't sign checks, profits went down 7%. So he began signing checks again. Checks every nail and doorknob. And that's his micromanagement, which is partially a handicap, but partially an asset as the president. But what I've noticed evolve is that captain of the baseball team who has to recognize the talents of the rest of the team or you don't win the game. His first TV presentation to the nation was that 8 minutes in the Oval Office, he was all alone, nothing around him, kind of like the way I am, although I have books. He didn't even have books. He had curtains behind him and 8 minutes of a monotone. Before you know it, over those press conferences, more and more people came. The members of FEMA, the members of the Treasury Department, and the health professionals, Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci. More and more, he stopped using the word I, and it became we, and made very clear that he wanted appreciation for the team. He is in his rescue mode. He sees himself as a hero. But ultimately, when he's going to make a decision about whether to open the nation or not, and he was asked about what he would ultimately rely on, he said he will accept all the facts, but finally it's what's up here. And what he's talking about is his own reliance and belief in his instinct and belief in his understanding that once given all the facts, something will take him over and he will know the way. And certainly for all of us, our hope is that he does know the way. History will only be the judge of that for all of us. I'll leave it at that, except for one last comment. My wish is for all of us to see better days and to get through this terrible catastrophe, but we will always be left with those who have lost people, those in the surrounding circle of the lost people, and this devastation. In this all, I think this Trump will follow the precepts I've outlined here and bring us all to a better point. Thank you for considering these thoughts. Bye.